Before Jay Sebring became the official hairdresser to the stars, he was Thomas John Cummer, born on October 10, 1933, in Birmingham, Alabama. He served in the Navy for 4 years after graduation before heading for the glitz and the glitter of Hollywood, where he took on his new name. Once in LA, he attended beauty school and opened up his own little shop on Fairfax, but he struggled. He was working 13-hour days and was barely getting by. Something had to give. Now, before I get into the story, I want to warn you that this one is going to take a very dark turn. A turn that deals with people having their lives forcefully taken from them. If that is something that you can't handle today, I totally understand, and I will see you in the next one. Trying to find a foothold in success, Jay took on a whole new approach to styling men's hair. While no one had ever shampooed men's hair before a cut, Jay did. While most barbers were cutting men's hair with clippers, Jay used scissors. While men had no desire to sit under a hairdryer and deal with those slow heat lamps, Jay brought in a newfangled handheld blow dryer from Europe. While most barbers were finishing off haircuts with Brill cream, Jay used hairspray. His newfound innovative approach had him raking in the cash. Instead of charging $1.50 for a cut like his contemporaries, Jay was charging $25. To his clients, Jay's salon was worth more than the cost. There were celebrity sightings, starlets shampooing hair, hot coffee, and even hotter gossip, along with a damn good haircut. Jay befriended the likes of Frank Sinatra, Steve McQueen, and Sammy Davis Jr. Kirk Douglas requested him specifically to do hair for Spartacus. He was responsible for Jim Morrison's iconic mane and is said to have been the inspiration behind his friend Warren Beatty's character, George Roundy, in Shampoo. Life was good for Jay. He had the notoriety and the cash to go with it. I mean, there were rumors that he was peddling more than hair products at the salon, which led to the nickname the Candyman. But his salons were doing very good in their own right. And when you have that kind of money in Hollywood, you have to have a buzzworthy house to go with it, right? And that cute little mansion at 9820 Easton Drive in Benedict Canyon was it. The house was built in the 1920s and had once been home to Hollywood actress Jean Harlow and her husband, MGM producer Paul Byrne. And if you watched the video before this one, you know that Paul allegedly took his own life in the home mere months after marrying Jean. And while this fact may have dissuaded many other buyers, Jay had no problem with it. In fact, it was one of his favorite things to tell his visitors about. When he toured a close friend through his brand new home, he showed off every room, including the closet where Paul had been found. He told his friend, "When I go, the whole world is going to know about it." A year later, Jay would hear about a new young starlet by the name of Sharon Tate. Jay was intrigued, telling his friends, "I'm going to get her. I'm going to get her." And get her he did. His friend Joe Hyams was a West Coast bureau chief and columnist for the New York Herald Tribune, and Jay asked Joe if he could, maybe introduce him to Sharon. Joe had arranged an interview with Sharon, and as they were wrapping up, Jay came in and sat down next to the young actress. The next day, Joe called up Jay at his home on Easton Drive to see how the date went. Sharon answered the phone. The pair dated for years. Jay was absolutely besotted with Sharon. In 1965, they headed to London to prepare for Sharon's upcoming film. It was her first time cast in a lead role. With most of the filming being done in France, Jay returned home to LA for work. Sharon stayed behind, and after filming wrapped, she stayed in London, which is where she met Roman Polanski. After the two worked on Roman's film, The Fearless Vampire Life Takers, together, they grew closer. So close that Sharon moved into the director's apartment with him and ended her relationship with Jay. Jay was obviously heartbroken, and he flew to London with the intention of meeting with Roman. Friends said that the former Playboy had been crazy about Sharon and that the biggest mistake he had ever made was not marrying her. Not that he hadn't tried, though. He had proposed before, but she had turned him down, knowing that she would want to retire from acting and start a family as soon as she got married, which was something she wasn't prepared to do at that point. Despite the betrayal, Jay became friends with Roman and remained a close confidant of Sharon, who he viewed as family. Sharon and Roman were married in London in 1968, even though Roman was chronically unfaithful, a characteristic that Sharon hoped she could change. She was once quoted as saying, "We have a good arrangement. Roman lies to me and I pretend to believe him." Cute. The pair eventually moved to LA, where they took up residence in the famous Chateau Marmont before renting out Patty Duke's house on Summit Ridge Drive. When Sharon became pregnant towards the end of the year, they moved to 10050 Cielo Drive in Benedict Canyon, a 6-minute drive from Jay's house, a place that Sharon had once called home. The house had been previously occupied by Terry Melcher, son of Doris Day, and his girlfriend at the time, Candace Bergen. Now, if you've ever listened to the podcast that I share with cult elder Auntie Amy, a real cult classic, then you might remember her talking about this. That summer, Sharon had joined Roman in London before returning home on July 20th. Roman's friends Wojciech Frykowski and Abigail Folger, heiress to the Folgers' coffee fortune, had moved into the Cielo Drive house at Roman's behest to stay with Sharon while he was still working in London. He was set to return to LA on August 12th, so he could be there for the birth of their child, but Sharon was annoyed that Roman was taking his sweet time getting home. And on August 8th, she went out for lunch with her friend Joanna Patet, where she aired her grievances with her husband. That evening, she apparently dined at the El Coyote Cafe with Wojciech, Abigail, and her old friend, Jay Sebring. They all returned to the house on Cielo Drive, where Jay stayed over. He was often at the house hanging out. It wasn't something that was limited to him. Their house was open to many. Some thought that Sharon and Roman were a little too trusting. That night, Tex Watson, member of the cult The Family, was ordered by their leader, Charles Manson, to go to the house on Cielo Drive and totally destroy everyone inside. His direct orders, he said, were to do it as gruesome as you can. And why the house on Cielo Drive? Well, Charles had been there before, looking to get a record deal from then-resident and record producer Terry Melcher. It looked like he hadn't gotten Terry's change of address. Needless to say, Tex took his orders very seriously. He first took the life of Stephen Parent out in the driveway. Stephen was the friend of property caretaker William Garrettson. He was only 18 years old. Tex then broke into the house and let in fellow members Susan Atkins, Linda Kassibian, and Patricia Krenwinkel. They then took the life of Jay after he chastised them for the rough treatment of the very pregnant Sharon. Jay was only 35 years old. Wojciech had managed to escape his restraints as he fought his way outside, but Tex caught up to him and attempted to take his life. They then heard Abigail escape to the pool area, which is where they found her, and took her life. Abigail was 2 days shy of her 26th birthday. Wojciech, who was severely wounded, was still struggling to get away. They eventually took his life as well. He was only 32 years old. Inside the home, Sharon begged for them to hold her hostage and let her live so that she could give birth to her son. They didn't. They took her life too. Sharon was only 26 years old. Now, I'm not going to get into the grisly details of what happened that night, but it is terrifying that a group of people could go into a home and do that much damage without knowing who they were doing it to. 8 years after Sharon's death, Roman was arrested for doing deplorable things to a 13-year-old girl. Since the courts rejected his plea deal, he knew that he was going to go to jail for a really long time, so he fled to Europe, where he has been living as a fugitive ever since. He is 92. A year after Sharon's death, Fate magazine published an article based on an interview that Sharon had done in 1967. In it, the interviewer had asked Sharon if she had ever had a psychic experience. She recounted an evening that had happened a year prior when she had been staying alone at Jay's house on Easton Drive while he was away in New York working on franchise opportunities. Sharon had been getting ready to go to sleep in the primary bedroom when she started experiencing a funny feeling that was preventing her from sleeping. As she turned on the light, she saw a creepy little man moving about outside the room. He looked like all the descriptions I had ever read of Paul Byrne, she said. The presence then came into the room but seemed to be unaware of Sharon. She said he was moving rather fast and was bumping into things. He seemed solid to her. While the presence was not threatening, it was still terrifying for Sharon, and she fled from the room. As she started to head downstairs, she saw someone tied to the staircase. She couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but felt like it was supposed to be either her or Jay. The apparition had its throat cut open. Looking for a much-needed drink, Sharon headed to what she referred to as the playroom, but couldn't find the liquor cabinet. Something intuitively told her to open a shelf on a nearby bookcase. There she found a button that opened the bookcase to reveal a bar. Not out of sorts for a house that was built during Prohibition. As she had a drink to calm her nerves, she pinched herself, but felt nothing. She was delighted to realize that it was nothing but a dream. But then whatever had led her to the bar told her to tear a piece of wallpaper away from the base of the bar. She discovered that the base was solid copper and couldn't believe that anyone would have ever wallpapered over it. She reminded herself then that it was still a dream, pinching herself again, and again she felt nothing. At that point, Sharon decided she might be able to sleep, and so she made her way back upstairs past the grisly apparition tied to the newel post and past the bumbling ghost of Paul Byrne. Somehow she managed to crawl into bed and fall soundly asleep. Sharon was awoken the next morning by Jay downstairs, calling out, "Hey Sharon, are you home?" His work trip had been cut short. As they caught up, she chuckled to herself, recounting her nightmare. Jay didn't quite understand what she was laughing about, but she didn't think it was worth explaining. But then they walked into the playroom together, which is where they discovered that the bookcase was wide open and that there were scraps of wallpaper scattered around the bottom of the bar, revealing its copper base. At the time, the interviewer didn't know what to tell her, but after her death, he came to believe that Sharon had experienced a premonition of the end of both her and Jay's lives. Now, I didn't want to go into the details of the horrific way that their lives were taken, but in order for you to understand how eerie this is, you need to know that both Jay and Sharon had been stabbed repeatedly and hanged. Jay's parents sold the house on Easton Drive in the early 1970s. The main house has not been on the market since, but the coach house was put on the market in 2013. While the owners of the main house claim to have never experienced anything paranormal in the home, they did have issues with Manson-obsessed creeps lurking about the property. Now, maybe Sharon's experience was coincidence, or maybe it really was a warning from the beyond. Jay's house had seen its fair share of sadness. There was Paul's death, another alleged self-imposed life-taking, and a drowning in the pool. Not to mention the fact that Jean Harlow had also passed away at the age of 26 from kidney failure. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you liked this one as much as you could. If you did, please save it and share it with your friends. It really does help spread the good word of the cult. Zap doesn't like to show these videos, so if you like them, please show them to others. And don't forget to follow me on the gram and the tube just in case, especially if you're south of the 49th parallel. Good day, and may the good cult be with you.